without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce our guest today. This is Dr. Ivan Misner. He's the founder of Business Networking International, and he's about to share with you all today how mentors played a role in his life and how they helped him achieve the successes that he's achieved so far. So without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Ivan Misner. Ivan, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Gary. It's a pleasure to be on. I appreciate it.
So Ivan, I'm very curious. I'm excited to learn from you your story of how you got here today. I mean, obviously BNI is one of the largest networking groups for businesses across the world. I know I've been to BNI events. It's an excellent group of people meeting together. So one, how did you come up with the idea and how did you get into this type of work and just connecting people together?
Well, yeah, we now have almost 9,100 chapters in more than 70 countries around the world, 257,172 members as of this morning. I get a daily report knowing exactly how many members are in the organization. So how did it get started? I'd like to tell you I had this vision of an international organization, but the truth is I needed some referrals from my consulting practice. I put together people who I trusted. They trusted me, and we started doing business. People came who couldn't join because we only take one person per profession. And they asked me if I'd help them open up their own group. And I did, and we opened another and another and another. And then, in a short time, less than a year, we had 20 chapters. And that's when I realized that I had struck a chord in the business community, that people needed referrals, wanted referrals, but they didn't have a platform to get referrals. And so that's when I decided to scale the company and build it. We now, last year, as of last year, we passed, just last year, 2018, we passed 11.2 million referrals and generated 14.2 billion, with a B, $14.2 billion worth of business for our members all around the world. Now, just so you know, 14.2 billion is more than the gross domestic product for the country of Liechtenstein.
That's amazing.
It's a small country, but it's still pretty cool.
That's a whole country. Yeah, that's amazing. And I think, obviously as an entrepreneur, I think the coolest thing, you can say that you created this. This is something that you birthed. I don't know. I've heard, sometimes entrepreneurs refer to their entrepreneurial endeavor as their baby, but you created this phenomenon, this amazingness. A couple of questions about that. One, what made you initially decide only one type of business industry per group?
So it's really easy. The first group I created to get referrals for myself and to help my friends. Bottom line is I didn't want my competition there. So my group, I don't want competition. So I formed a group where nobody had competition. I didn't have it. The lawyer didn't have it. None of us had direct competition. And, we split the classifications, like there might be a residential real estate agent and a commercial real estate agent, but they have a lane and they stay in it. We might have a family lawyer and a contract lawyer, but they have lanes. And I had no idea that it would, be that attractive to so many people. So I let one person per profession because I didn't want my competition in the room.
I think one of the most important and crucial components that you said, because this kind of leads to my next question. I'm assuming this is the way it was. But you said, I don't want, this is my group. This is my group. This is I'm taking ownership of it. And that's not just how you feel. This is how everybody in that group feels. Yeah. And I feel that's such a strong component to a network effect. It's almost, I think it very much plays along similar to the idea of the IKEA effect, where if you help build something, you're going to feel much greater ownership of that thing. I think that's the case with mentorship. If you have a mentee that's able to achieve success, you feel a sense of pride because you help them from where they're at to where they became. And I just think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's certainly a stakeholder sense at the chapter level. Let me just step back a second and say, by the way, that I don't think organizations that allow many people from different professions are bad. I belong to a chamber. I belong to other organizations. They're great. They're just not what I was looking for. And I think that, having different kinds of networks helps for you to build a powerful personal network. So I'm not opposed to those others. This is just what I wanted.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And obviously you weren't alone because this caught on like wildfire. What do you think really attributed the most to helping it catch on so rapidly?
Well, I don't know how rapid it was. It took a long time. I tell people I'm a 20-year overnight success. It took 20 years to build really, truly a global global enterprise. Today, we have over 7,000 people who work for the company worldwide. So it's been 34 years in the making. I have a presentation that I do called Garage to Global. And I talk about how I took my business literally out of my garage to a global organization with offices all around the world. There's a handful of things that I think it takes. I think first and foremost, you've got to create systems and processes for your business. And you got to write that all down. And then you got to teach people. You got to make it scalable. You have to teach people how to do the things so that it can become replicable. And you have to remember that education is a leaky bucket process. If I teach you something, some of the information leaks out. When you teach somebody else, more information leaks out. At some point, there's a half a bucket of information and people start throwing their own stuff in because it's not complete, but it's not the right stuff to throw in. So, you want to have systems and processes that are replicable and trainable. I think the single biggest thing, if I had to narrow it down to the most important out of many important things, it would be that I have found that successful businesses do 6 things 1,000 times and not 1,000 things 6 times. Most businesses that fail are masters at doing 1,000 things 6 times. And they don't create processes and then do them over and over and over again. I actually keep this right here on my desk because I talk about this with some regularity. People are constantly chasing bright, shiny objects. Oh, look at that. Let's try this idea now. And they run off doing stuff that's stupid. But they do it because it looks fun, looks interesting, they do it. This is where mentors come in, by the way. I say do 6 things 1,000 times. And by the way, it doesn't have to be 6. It could be 5. It could be 7. But it's a handful of things. So people ask me, well, how do you know which things are the right things? Mentors. People you trust. People you know. They could even be virtual mentors. I'm singing to the choir here because people are watching or listening to this podcast. And they're coming to this because they're looking for knowledge, ideas, information. And those people get it, that there are virtual mentors who can help them figure out what things they should be doing. And then when they have that figured out, got to do it 1,000 times.
Yeah, I love it. I think, there's a lot of sayings that I conjure up when I think about this. I think one by Will Smith, he says, any focus on a plan B is a distraction from your plan A. Really just emphasizing the key point that you should be focused on what you're doing. You'd rather be, or Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule, you'd rather be really like world class at one thing than mediocre at a bunch of different things.
Yeah, absolutely true. I walk into a room of people and I may not be the smartest man in the room. I may not be the most talented man in the room, but Garrett, I'm almost always the most persistent man in a room. I am like a dog with a bone. I got something I'm working on, and I am the poster child for that 6 things 1,000 times.
I love that. As an entrepreneur, I think there's a couple quotes that I could think of that kind of attest to that testament of perseverance. I see a lot of entrepreneurs, they get started and maybe they get a little bit of funding and then they fizzle out after a year or two. I think that there's an entrepreneurial adage that goes both ways. One that says you can never fail if you never give up. But I think that there's a little bit of truth in the sense that as you discover new successes, you can build on those, but they don't necessarily have to fall into the timeline of what everyone else is doing. You can have your own timeline. Would you say that was the case with you in building BNI?
Yeah, well, look, I think, I think that's a good rule that you gave. There's always exceptions to it. Sometimes people do businesses that were from the start really a hobby. They were never a good business. Or sometimes people they do things that are more of a cause than an entrepreneurial enterprise. And so, sometimes you can do things like that no matter how hard you work, they're not going to be financially stable. Those aside, I agree with that assessment that, you keep plugging away and you're going to achieve success. For me, success was a layer cake. It was like one layer after another layer of another layer and another layer, constantly growing gradually, but consistently over time. It was a long process. And I was very patient. And I was a dog with a bone.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense, and that makes me think. At what point did you hit that transition from being a consultant to focusing totally on BNI?
Four years.
When did that happen?
Yeah, 4 years, 1989. And I can tell you the very statement that made me switch. Somebody asked me for the umpteenth time, so what do you do? Are you a management consultant or do you run this network? And I said just one too many times, I said, well, my consulting is my vocation, but BNI is my avocation. And I said it, and they're like, oh, okay, I get it. And they left, and I was like, why am I not doing my avocation? Why is my business not my avocation, what I'm passionate about? And I decided literally in a split second, I was going to sell my consulting business.
Wow.
And do BNI full time. And that's what I did. And I took a cut in pay, and it was a little bit of a struggle, but I never looked back. I, really focused on building the company.
Tell me about that struggle. I think everybody in the audience, don't get me wrong, we love hearing the success stories, but it's the struggles that I feel like where you get the most juice. Because I think as a college student, you're figuring out your path. You're like, what decision do I make? You're at this precipice in life of, what do I do now? Tell me about that struggle. How did mentors help you overcome that struggle? What did you face? What was the most difficult component of the struggle, and how did you overcome it?
Well, I have, how many hours is the show? I have had so many mistakes. I don't know where to start. But before I get to there, you mentioned something about college students asking, what they should do. Let me get to my mistakes, but let me address that one. Because I was a professor, an adjunct professor at a state university in California for 16 years. And I would always get young people coming up to me and saying, yeah, Dr. Misner, what business should I go in? And I said, okay, well, good question. What do you love to do? And they said, no. They would always say, no, that's not my question. My question is, what's the latest up and coming business? What business should I be going into? And I said, yeah, okay, I get it. What do you like to do? And I remember one guy, he looked at me and he said, you're not listening to me. And I said, actually, you're not listening to me. What do you like to do? And he said, well, that's not my question. I said, yeah, but the answer really is all about that. He said, how? I said, because if I tell you, you should be doing mobile apps and you hate programming and you don't particularly like that industry, then I'm going to set you up to fail. So give me some things that you like to do, because if you're passionate about those things, then you can find a business. And I mean, look at BNI. I didn't invent networking. Been around forever. All I did was create a system and a process, and I was a dog with a bone with it, and I created a global enterprise. So it really is a matter of understanding what you like to do. All right, so mistakes.
Well, I want to add one thing to that.
Go ahead, yeah.
Because understanding what you want to do, but more importantly, back to that first point, persistence. Yeah. Understanding what you want to do and not giving up on it. It's so often, I feel like, and this is just for me working with college students, you see your friends, you see your peers, you see what they're doing, and that becomes your barometer for success. I mean, I think, what does Jim Rohn say? You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And if you see your friends in nice cars or in nice cities or in nice apartments, and you think to yourself, well, I'm passionate about this, but like they seem to be living a cushy lifestyle. One of the things I always preach is comfort is the opposite of innovation. You need to be uncomfortable. And I think that persistence that you mentioned or I think that point of finding what you love, but then not giving up on it is the key.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see these people in their nice cars and big homes, but you don't know what kind of debt they have either. So, I mean, a lot of times I've seen people that, they're living a big life and they're building a big debt behind them. So you never know what people really are doing. You got to keep your eye on the ball and try to build the business that you're trying to build. Look, I made so many mistakes along the way, I don't know where to begin. One of the first mistakes I made early in BNI's history was in the first year. The way I set up the chapters, most of the marketing money stayed with the chapter. to market. And what I discovered was that they were throwing really bitchin' parties with the marketing money. And they didn't call them parties, of course, they called them mixers. And they would do this big mixer and invite people, and it wasn't working out well. I remember going to one, there was a bash. They had a couple of dozen members in the chapter. Now, this is back in 1985. They spent like $17, $18 per head, and they were expecting like 40 people. And that was a lot of money back in 1985, $17 a person for, food at a house. And of the 24, they said, no, this is going to be great. We're going to get lots of visitors. They're going to come, and then they're going to join a chapter. And they got 16 of their 24, 25 members and no visitors. Not one. And I remember being at that event going, I'm eating the marketing funds for this chapter. They just blew it. And then a couple other things happened, and I decided I had to change this. But I couldn't just go back into all these chapters and say, all that marketing money you have, I'm taking it back. They would have killed me. So one of the things that I learned early on is that you got to collaborate. I've got here on my desk this paperweight. My mother gave this to me when I was 13 years old. Diplomacy is the art of letting someone else have your way. And she said, honey, I love you, but you're a bull in a china shop. You just knock people over, and you got to learn how to be more diplomatic. She said, this isn't about manipulation. It's about collaboration, and you got to learn how to collaborate with people. And so I put the members together, one person from every chapter, and we brainstormed how, it's a longer story, but I took a line of credit out on my house. I took a second mortgage on my house to develop enough material to show them what we could do with the marketing funds. And I didn't tell them, this is what we're going to do with it. I said, what do you think? Would this be a better strategy? And they were all like, oh yeah, that would be way better. So we'll go back to our chapter and tell them what we're going to do. And through that collaborative process, the biggest problem that I had in the first 4 or 5 years of BNI was solved by my members or with my members. And so, if you have problems, I'm a real believer in attempting to collaborate your way through the issues.
Yeah, I love that. That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like, and I see this a lot. I always tie this back to students and their experiences. And so I'm thinking to myself, I see a lot of young people, young professionals that have gotten into their jobs and they face some adversity. And a lot of times I think we tend to assume that this person doesn't like us, or they know that what they're doing is hurting us or like causing us stress. But in reality, it's that lack of collaboration, that lack of communication of, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I've observed, this is how I'm feeling, this is, what I need, and, this is what I would hope that you would be able to do. This is my request for the future. And I think that what you're conveying with this collaboration is something that's so vital for young people to learn, is that people don't have it out for you. You need to be open. You need to communicate. Yeah. You need to collaborate.
Yeah, I think collaborative systems are really a way to build a strong company. I'm actually working on a book right now on. It's called The Third Paradigm. The first paradigm being competition, the second paradigm being cooperation, and the third paradigm being co-creation, which is basically collaboration on steroids. And we did a survey of about 4,000 people and asked them, what are some really effective situations you've been in where you've seen collaboration work, and where have you seen it not work? And then we're going to talk about how to create a co-creative environment in any business. A good example of it for the people who are listening to this going, I don't know what co-creation is. Crowdsourcing is a classic example of co-creation. And so, I'm working on a book. I probably won't be ready until 2020 or 2021, but we're working on it.
So do you mind elaborating on that a little bit further? That's really interesting to me. I'd love to learn a little bit more.
So the first paradigm was all about competition. It was about scientific management. The late 1800s, early 1900s, Frederick Taylor, the Galbraiths, the Gants. These are people that created scientific management. But that was all about production, and the person was irrelevant, completely irrelevant. It was about productivity. and people were completely secondary. The second paradigm was about cooperation and collaboration. And that really started around the 60s with people like Douglas McGregor, who came up with the concept of theory X, theory Y, where you kind of compare production with people. And it was the first time that management experts were saying, hey, you know what? People are kind of really important in this process. By the way, I studied at USC under Dr. Warren Bennis, who was in his day one of the world's leading experts, and he worked with Douglas McGregor back in the 60s.
Wow.
And he told me at dinner one time, he said, Warren passed away a few years ago, but he told me at dinner one time, he said, that was so revolutionary. We think of it today and we think, what's so revolutionary about it? That was so revolutionary in the 60s, that people were important in the business, that McGregor, they used to have to close down the university because McGregor got bomb threats because he was a communist. I swear to you. And so we've come a long way where today, you know, it's obvious that people are critical for the success of a business. But I believe we're moving into the third paradigm, which is all about co-creation, where you're not just collaborating, you are literally co-creating products, services, industries. So we take it back to that story I gave you about that task force I formed. They did such an amazing job helping me solve the problem. I said, hey, a task force is a one issue entity. They deal with it, they're done. I said, I'd love to turn this into a standing board, the board of advisors. And let's take a look at every policy BNI has. You guys approve them or help rewrite them? And they're like, yeah, we're in. And so BNI was way ahead of its time. We co-created with the members, our clients, every single policy, every single member policy in the organization was written by or approved by the members. That's an example of co-creation. And businesses that can really master the art of co-creation are going to outperform the competition. I think that's why BNI is the 600-pound gorilla in networking.
That's amazing. That's very insightful. So obviously this is a mentor podcast. I would love if you could share who are some of your mentors and how have they most influenced you?
So I think anyone who's been around, I mean, you can see I have enough gray hair that I've got, you know, I've been around a long time. So I've had many mentors in my life. Certainly my parents were mentors, very positive influence. Any people skills I have, I got from my mother. But my work ethic, I definitely got from my father. So they were mentors, not highly educated people, but very influential in my life. In high school, I had some amazing mentors that absolutely changed the trajectory of my life. If anyone wants to, you know, see the whole story, pick up a book I wrote called Avoiding the Networking Disconnect. And I tell the whole story about a teacher who completely changed the trajectory of my life by just doing one simple thing. And it's a long story, but it's really powerful. The book is called Avoiding the Networking Disconnect. And it's the section in there is Ivan's Why. Why do I do what I do? And it's from that mentor. But professionally, I think one of the biggest mentors I had early in BNI was Michael Gerber, the E-Myth. Yeah, I read that book, followed his system, and scaled my company. It's interesting, I did a radio interview about 10 years ago, and somebody asked me, you know, who helped you in the early days? You know, who were you reading? I said, Michael Gerber changed my business. Guess who was listening to that interview? Michael Gerber. And he called me up and he said, hey, I really appreciate your kind words. And I met him and we're now really good friends. As a matter of fact, I got a podcast, you know, right here in my office that he and I did a video. And so we're really good friends. It's his birthday tomorrow, or actually it's this week, but I'm going to be on a live webinar with him tomorrow, celebrating his birthday. So people like Michael Gerber, Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul and Success Principles, amazing person. He's become good friends over the years. Richard Branson, who I've met on a number of occasions, has been a virtual mentor more than anything, although, you know, we've met and talked a lot, and I've certainly learned by observing him. So I've had many mentors during my life. I think the one thing that people have to remember is that you can have virtual mentors. And I talk about that. I just released a book called Who's in Your Room? And it's about the secret to creating your best life. And one of the things we talk about is you want to create a great life, you need a mentor. You need mentors. And you may say, gee, I don't know any really successful people. Start with virtual mentors. In my day, virtual mentors were just in books and audio tapes. That's it. But today, Garrett, oh my goodness, today you got podcasts like this, you've got YouTube, you've got blogs. There's so much content out there. What you have to do is figure out who resonates with you, who's going to add value, make them virtual mentors. And I bet you over time, if you become successful, you'll meet these mentors and build relationships with them like I have. Last point, I've got a book coming out by the end of this year called The Networking Mentor. And it's all about how someone took them under their wing, taught them how to network effectively. They did really well. And the end of the book is them really being successful and taking someone else under their wing so that the process goes full circle. And I think that if you've been mentored, you have an obligation, and it's helped you, you have an obligation to mentor others.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. I was just about to ask you, what is next, Ivan, for you? What is something that you like to share with our audience of people that's going on with your world, and what's next with your world?
Well, I'm really in a position today where I'm doing what I'm most passionate about. I think an entrepreneur is either working in their flame or working in their wax. When they're in their flame, they're on fire, they're excited, they love what they do. When they're working in their wax, it takes all their energy away. And it's taken me a long time, but I now have people who run BNI. I'm no longer involved in the day-to-day management. I'm sort of the Colonel Sanders of BNI. And I certainly have the hair color for it. And so I get to do the things I'm passionate about, which, oh, by the way, is this. I love doing interviews, love talking to people, love pouring into people the lessons that I've learned. I love to write books, and I like to do presentations. So that's really, my future. I've got the Networking Mentor coming out. I've got the Third Paradigm coming out. I've got a book called Garage to Global, how I took my business out of my garage and turned it into a global enterprise. That should be out in a few years. I mean, I usually work on 2 or 3 books at a time. So I've got a handful of books in the works. And so I'm doing what I'm passionate about, doing what I love.
That's amazing. And any final suggestions, if there's any tip that a college student can take away from this video podcast, what is that? What can they take away from you, Ivan?
So hopefully I've given you a couple of good tips, but let me give you a tip that you need to write it down, because 5 years from now, I think it'll really resonate with you. If you're a college student, like you're going to hear this right now, you're going to go, yeah, okay, fine. But 5 years from now, you write that down, do a reminder for 2, 3, 4 years from now to have this pop up. I really believe that in life, it's not just who's in our story. I told you about the high school professor, my parents. I talked about Richard and Jack and Michael. They're in my story. But the real key to me is not who's in my story, but whose story are you in? That's the real key, is whose story are you in? Whose life have you made a difference in? It's amazing to me how sometimes one offhanded comment, good or bad, can influence people in amazing ways. Amazing ways. And so if you have been mentored and you start achieving a level of success, start thinking about the fact of not only who's in your story, but whose story are you in? What difference are you making in other people's lives so that 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, you are part of their story because you've helped them in some way. To me, that's the power of mentoring, is paying it forward. Wow.
Great insight. That was really, really deep. That was really, really great. Well, Ivan, thank you. This is fantastic. I'm really grateful to have you on the show. This has been excellent. I'm really grateful to have you on.
My pleasure. Anytime you want to have me back, I'm happy to be back.